About a week ago, while contemplating what to share for this speech, I was having a bit of difficulty actually coming up with a topic. But no matter what, I knew I wanted my speech to do three things. I wanted what I was sharing to express vulnerability as a strength, not a weakness. I wanted my speech to be powerful, to have the true possibility of changing people's lives. And last but not least, I needed my speech topic to be completely unexpected and out of the ordinary. But beyond that, I had no idea what to share. So I began to research a few topics, and sooner than expected, I thought I found the one. My plan was to speak on the power of hugs. I began to get so excited thinking about all that I could share, the emotional, psychological, and physical aspects of the simplest form of human connection. But that idea got rejected. So again, I started to look for other possible speech topics. And eventually, one of my new ideas did get accepted, and that's what I'm here to speak about today. I'm going to share with you all a bit about perfectionism. The addiction never recognized, the elephant in the room, and oftentimes the most common quality among teenage girls. Thought to be a normal human characteristic, the need to be perfect can actually control every aspect of a person's life. But where does this unrealistic desire stem from? This question has played over and over in my mind for a long time, and I think I finally found the answer. So that's what I'm here to explore. To start out, I'm going to tell you all the reason that I really did not want to speak on this topic, because it actually provides the basis for how I discovered the true root of perfectionism. See, for most of my life, I've struggled with anxiety, in different forms because of different things, but ultimately at the base of it all was a never-ending fear of failure, otherwise known as perfectionism. So to me, this presented a problem. I have been trying to reach perfection my whole life, yet I'm here trying to tell everyone else that it's impossible to reach. I figured that if anyone discovered my secret, I would be known as hypocritical and not inspirational. But as I thought about this further, I realized that I know perfectionism is unattainable in my head, even though it hasn't quite reached my heart. So there, I discovered that perfectionism is not a psychological problem, but in all actuality, the need to be perfect can be found in a person's heart. The root of perfectionism is shame. Whether perfection manifests in your Instagram post or what you see in the mirror, the need to be perfect always stems from a past experience. An experience which almost always makes us feel bad about ourselves. And that's exactly what shame is. Shame is the feeling that we are bad, not good enough, or even a mistake. Now, this is not to be confused with guilt. Guilt is I've done something bad, whereas shame is I am bad. Guilt can be changed by fixing a behavior, but shame takes a bit longer to reverse. Ultimately, shame is the problem, and perfectionism is just the manifestation of shame in one's life. So, now that we know what the problem is, we can begin to understand the exciting part. The one thing that counteracts shame to heal our fear of failure and need to be perfect. Brene Brown said, "If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs three things to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive." See, the two most powerful words when we're in struggle are "me too." Understanding that another person is going through something difficult. If we are going to find a way to connect to each other again, vulnerability is key. Because the antidote for shame is vulnerability. The antidote for shame is empathy. And that is how we understand why these two things are so powerful. Once again, the only way to solve the problem of shame is to recognize vulnerability as an asset and not a weakness. Okay, before I continue though, I do want to point out one thing. I realize that most high schoolers have probably never heard the words vulnerability, perfectionism, and shame so much as you all have in the last 5 minutes. But once we begin to understand how powerful these things really are, we can begin to understand why the result is so amazing. So just try and bear with me. Vulnerability. What is it and how does it affect us? We cannot even scratch the surface of how vulnerability affects shame without first learning how it impacts our own lives. Vulnerability is hard, uncomfortable, and can be messy at times, but it also allows things like communication, innovation, and creativity to enter in. Once a secret is exposed, or in other words, once vulnerability is expressed, shame no longer has power over a situation. Vulnerability is what makes humans human. Knowing what makes another person different from everyone else, recognizing personality traits and characteristics of that person that make them amazing, is what builds relationships. And relationship provides the basis for vulnerability. But what does this have to do with perfectionism and shame? There's one way that shame, perfectionism, relationship, and vulnerability all connect, and that is, perfectionism is built from shame, which is the desire to be someone you're not because past experience has taught you that who you truly are isn't good enough. But vulnerability is having the courage to push past those mistakes, stand up and say, I'm not who they say I am. I'm not a mistake. I am good enough, and I'm not defined by my mistakes. Vulnerability is having the courage to be who you truly are without conforming to the critic's expectations of who you should be. Shame and perfectionism crush relationship and vulnerability, and that provides a connection between these four seemingly confusing ideas. But why does this all matter? How could this affect our lives? What profound difference could this have in the way we see ourselves and each other? To find these answers, we have to explore one more thing. But this part is actually surprisingly simple. We have to learn how shame and vulnerability affect the levels of joy in our lives. See, shame is the thing that tells us we're not good enough, not smart enough, thin enough, pretty enough, talented enough. Shame is the thing that makes us feel as though being perfect is all that matters. Shame is the thing that forces us to be someone we never can and we're never meant to be. So just think for a second. In the moments where shame is taking over every aspect of your existence, how much joy do you feel? Think of an experience that made you regret ever showing people the real you. If you feel any empathy or human connection, I can guess with almost complete certainty that joy was not at all present in that moment. Now, think of a moment when you had the courage to share your story, to be vulnerable with someone important to you. In that moment, when you finally accepted your true self, I can guess that more likely than not, joy was much more prevalent in that situation than in the previous one. That's why this matters. Perfectionism will lead you into a life of fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt, but vulnerability will help you express yourself in the most powerful and freeing ways. No matter what, mistakes make us human. Vulnerability gives us a way to express those mistakes and learn from them. Shame and perfectionism just gets in the way and stops you from being who you were made to be. So to end, I would like to share a quote from Leonard Cohen that has inspired me and impacted my life in the way I see perfectionism. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. Thank you.